Okay, for today's critical thought, we're going to talk about PvE and PvP based content and the major game design sin of forcibly integrating both together. Now, on the off chance you'll know what these terms mean, PvE refers to player versus the environment, or single player or group versus the AI gameplay. PvP is player versus player, which insert multiplayer game here as an example. And saying that it is a major sin to combine player versus the environment and player versus player content together may sound a little bit weird, especially with the rise of these two modes being put together in many AAA games over the last 15 years. But when it comes to the handling, PvE and PvP are typically experienced by two different communities. And we've seen developers go with several different aspects of how to have both parties be happy in a game. So the first and most recognizable example is that they are completely separate. You have PvE over here, you have PvP over here, and never the two shall mix. What I do in one mode doesn't affect what happens in the other. Now, there are some examples, or there are some exceptions to this rule. One of the big ones is having cosmetic options as a single player campaign reward. This can be player icons, gun skins, armor color graphics, you name it. And then we've seen some games where the multiplayer side may give you experience for the single player. As in, if I play with a group, I'll earn bonus experience, which then if I decide to play the game single player, I'll have that greater level. Or the idea of having a separate single player and multiplayer campaign, and you just move the character back and forth. But with that said, the other option, and one that we're seeing more and more of, is that the PvE is essentially a springboard into the PvP. Now what we mean by that is, I'm going to start your game playing the PvE or single player or story campaign. But eventually what's going to happen is I will either transition into PvP, or PvP modes will become unlocked, and I'll be able to kind of take what I've learned and apply it to fighting other players. This is the idea of basically you're using the single player campaign as both a proving ground to see if someone is good enough to basically get to PvP, and it's also essentially the education of the game, so you're not just dropping off someone right into multiplayer content and say, have fun, now die for 10 hours. And we see this a lot in games built on multiplayer communities, or MMOs as well. For instance, in DC Universe Online, I believe the PvP options unlock like at level 10, level 15, something like that. And then I can go in and out as I see fit. So, when this becomes a problem is when both forms are combined and are essentially required. You're basically required to play both to make progress in your game. So what that means is, if I'm playing the single player side, I may be forced to go into multiplayer to move the story forward. Or, in order to keep growing my multiplayer character, I am required to play single player content just by myself in order to get the necessary tools or upgrades or whatever to have a fighting chance in PvP. And the example and what kind of led to today's critical thought is from South Park's Phone Destroyer. This is the mobile South Park game that was released on iOS and Google Play a few days ago, which I think will be my first actual mobile game review for the site. And what they do is, in order to basically grow your party or your deck of cards out, you play the single player content to unlock the upgrade tokens and even get new cards to add to your group. But at specific points in the campaign, the game will stop progress until you've won a specified number of PvP matches. One being the key word there. It's not just play PvP, you must beat other players. So what happens is you enter this very weird situation in terms of progress, because the only or the easiest non-paying way to get the upgrade tokens or resources is to play the campaign. But the only way to progress in the campaign is to play PvP. But to win in PvP, you need to upgrade your cards and get higher quality stuff. So you see the problem here. Basically, it's forcing people into playing a mode that they don't want to play in order to get back to what they do. And not only that, but it creates a very lucrative option for exploiting monetization. Because if you can't progress in the single player campaign and you can't get enough upgrades, well, then you can spend money and hopefully get lucky with stuff there. And the problem with that is that it becomes very frustrating, especially if you're trying to progress. And for those of you wondering, this starts in the second chapter of the story campaign. So that's about 15 minutes into the game, and they're going to force you into PvP. That is long before you have access to a deck of cards you like, and maybe even start to figure out how to play the game. And that's the other major problem with that, is if you're doing this too early, it basically pushes everyone together before they even have a chance to experiment and grow things out. So when I was playing the PvP earlier, everybody's using the exact same cards because everybody's forced into it at this time. And the people who've already spent money and have gotten epic cards or enough upgrade material to level their cards up has basically an insurmountable advantage. Because again, this is a game built on abstraction. Now, one of the major points about this kind of discussion, and kind of the counter to this sin, is that you should never force the player into doing something that they don't want to do. One of the most popular expressions you'll hear supporters and game developers say about having these kinds of forced options or requiring them to do something is that we are empowering the player to step out of their comfort zone to try something new that they wouldn't do otherwise. And that is BS. It is complete and utter BS there. And the reason has to do with the psychology involved. And when we talk about psychology and game design, that is a good hour to 2 hour talk. But there are many ways to manipulate the player to do something. We can see this in just about every video game ever made, be it using lighting to direct them into a specific path, or the ever popular, if I step on a red block and it hurts me, then I know not to step on red blocks. But one of the most popular motivators when playing a video game is rewarding, positive reinforcement. And there is a major difference in psychology and the action between saying, you can do this and we'll give you a reward, versus, I am forcing you to do this and here's something as a consolation. And that's what this is doing in games like South Park, Phone Destroyer, and other titles that will integrate or force a player into doing something they don't want to do. Because if you want someone to stick around, you don't want to annoy them. We mentioned this on a recent live show, but a very important part of game design is don't piss off the person playing, especially if you expect them to spend money on your game afterwards. And this is the problem with Phone Destroyer, is that I can't just play the game and be rewarded by PvP when I want to. I have to be forced into it and then go back to the story campaign. And as a bonus, screw you to the fans, you can get a free PvP booster pack, but it's only after winning 3 times, and then it takes about 4 to 5 hours for it to reset, unless you spend premium currency. But the number of PvP matches required to progress in the story campaign start to get higher than 3. So you can see how they're trying to nickel and dime you there while still locking you away from content. And again, this is why these two modes are traditionally kept separate. Or if there is going to be cross-compatibility or cross-play, it's never forced. And a really good example of this is surprisingly from The Division. If we set aside the issues of hacking and exploiting, the game has a very fair PvE and PvP based content. You have, if you didn't play The Division, you have these story campaigns, the instance levels that you go into either solo with a party, and then you have open PvP called the Dark Zone. And in the Dark Zone, you will find gear that is higher quality than what you'll find in the single player campaign. But you'll never run into a story campaign mission that's going to require Dark Zone level gear. Well, it's very hard to say that there. You also have a separate story level and a Dark Zone level. And the story level is what allows you to see higher level story missions and unlock more of the content there, while a higher Dark Zone level gets you into the harder zones where there will be more rewards. But you only get Dark Zone cred for being in the Dark Zone and story cred for the story missions. And what makes this work is that I am being rewarded for either form of gameplay by playing the opposite. If I build up my gear or get better stuff in the story mission, that'll give me a greater chance to survive the Dark Zone. But let's say I'm having some trouble in the single player content. I can team with people in the Dark Zone, get some better gear, and take that into the story. So I'm being rewarded, but at the same time I'm not being forced to do either mode. There is never a point in playing the Division that the game will say, story mission unlocked, or story mission locked. You must kill 10 players in the Dark Zone in order to proceed. Or vice versa, saying, Dark Zone mission is, you are not allowed into the Dark Zone until you earn Dark Zone tickets, or DZTs, by completing single player missions, or by spending money on that. And that's the big point. I can be rewarded by playing either mode, but it's by my choice as to what I want to do. If I want to spend a day or two just doing single player story content, I can do that. If I want to just say screw the story and just go hunting players and getting stuff like that, I'm allowed. And the game is not stopping or hindering me in any way from doing either. With the Dark Zone, for instance, as you do more killing and get more rewards, you'll upgrade your Dark Zone level. So if someone just wants to immediately rush into the Dark Zone and start playing, they're free to do that. And likewise, if I just want to stick to the single player campaign and do all that content, I am able to progress that way. So this is not the same as something like Phone Destroyer, when everything is just, bundled together and forcing you to do both at the same time. And more importantly, though, when it's seen like this, it really brings on the pay to win or pay to be less annoying aspects. Because you are being matchmade with people who are your level. But that doesn't mean anything if those people have spent money or have gotten really lucky on their drops to have higher level cards or higher level gear. And what happens is, eventually you're going to reach a point where you're just going to be in a virtual arms race with these people. I can't progress in the single player side until I win PvP, but I need to play the single player side to get the resources I need to win at PvP. And we enter that ever popular catch-22. And this is why it's not good design to do this. If you want to have these modes be integrated, then have it as motivators, not forced content. Again, there is a huge difference between the wording and psychology of these two expressions. You can play Capture the Flag mode, and if you win 3 matches today, you'll get a free loot box. And then the other one is, Team Deathmatch is locked. You must win 3 Capture the Flag modes in order to unlock it, and get a free loot box. Again, if you're forcing someone to do something, you are not helping them. You're not really motivating them to play. And there are many other ways that you can get someone to try something new or think out of their own comfort zone or get out of their own comfort zone than forcing them to. As we said before, that classic adage, it's easier to catch flies with honey or sugar than it is with vinegar. So with that said, we're going to wrap up today's critical thought here. I'll have a more complete review of South Park Phone Destroyer probably up next week by the time you're watching this. But for those of you who are tuning in right now, can you think of games that did integrate PvE and PvP fully together, and how did it turn out for you? And for those of you watching, what do you prefer to play? Because for myself, I've always been more on the PvE side. I may dabble in PvP for a little bit, but there is no motivator that is going to be strong enough to get me to jump into games like Street Fighter, League of Legends, and Dota 2. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. If you have a suggestion for an upcoming critical thought or just a vlog piece, let me know in the comments below. But be sure to check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/gwbycer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.